Science for Everyday Decisions, series by Center for Sustainable Development at the Earth Institute, Columbia University, for your consideration for a more sustainable life through education for sustainable development.
Eco Ambassador series, and this is almost like the end of second week where we've been continuously doing this 4 p.m. Eastern series on Eco Ambassadors. We've been touching on various different topics. Before we go on, I want to share a couple of things regarding some posts that have been coming out. One is this post on UNESCO's call on education future. So what I'll do is in the chat, I'll send this link. They are asking for a 1,000-word essay on what education should be in the future. So definitely feel free to write your opinions and your ideas and send it to them. They're especially looking at youth to send their ideas. So if you have the time, definitely do that. The other thing is, whenever there is good weather, I think that people have the tendency to run out and meet with their friends and hang out with them. We have to be very careful. This is not the time to run out and into the playground and do all the things that we were doing earlier on. We have to keep maintaining a good distance, and this good distance is supposed to be 6 feet difference. I'll send this article, which is on social distancing. It has some basic information on what social distancing is and how much different the distance should be between people. So please read this article. It's very pertinent, especially when there is good weather. I see a lot of parents complaining and a lot of kids complaining that they need to be out and they need to hang out with their friends. So just as a word of caution. Today we have a very special session, and we are all very excited to welcome Dr. Nidhi Thakur. Thank you, Nidhi, for sparing time. I know you're busy with your teaching and stuff, but thanks for doing this with us, because sometimes life becomes very serious, and whenever life gets very serious, I look forward to Nidhi's poems because they have this element of bringing life back to all of us. So I hope that in that spirit of making sure that we have a voice which is full of excitement, which is full of positivism that is brought back in these difficult times. So thank you, Nidhi, for joining our call and leading this initiative, and welcome, and I hope that this will be an exciting session for all of us. Thanks, Nidhi.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Radhika, for creating this platform. All of us to come in these, very exceptional times. I want to give a warm welcome to everybody who's joining us from wherever they are. That you're being able to create time to join here. So it's very nice that we're all here together. And as Radhika rightly pointed, these are times which are full of so many unexpected aspects. So many things are happening and so much news, so much information, so many facts are coming to us at the speed of light, if you want to think like that, right? Because we all know that the COVID virus is expanding exponentially, which means every day it is multiplying by another 100 times. So while we do need to keep track of all the facts and we need to be on top of our facts, we also need to understand that essentially it's one human heart that we need to keep going, ready, and very, very active to empathize. That means to be able to sympathize with our co-humans who are suffering, as well as with the nature that is outside them. So on that note, this poetry session therefore becomes somewhat, if not fully relevant, at least it becomes somewhat, I feel in the right spirit to that extent. So I wrote some notes down, as I said, just as a brief introduction. I am an economist, so my formal training is in economics, and I currently teach economics. but poetry is something which has always come to me as a natural resting place. And when I say poetry, it's not just poetry, it is the idea of writing. It is always a refuge from everything that you've been thinking about, that you've been talking to people, and then sitting down to write. So that's one thing that, just writing for your own sake, and then eventually if other people get to see it, that's great. So that's one that, writing as a habit has come naturally to me. And personally, I can say I've always felt great about being able to write, even if for my own self. In the current situation where COVID-19 has induced social distancing, work from homes, no classes. So let me point to all of us listeners here, big and small. Two very interesting things have happened to all of us. And those two things are, one, our space has changed. Our functional physical space has changed. What does that mean? For the first time in almost all of our histories, we are all so homebound, right? Because of social distancing, our entire universe for now has collapsed into our home. So one is a change of physical space. Number two is that our sense of time needs a reorientation. What does that mean? The typical placeholders in a day, which were like, okay, I go to school from this time to this time, then I have a class at this time to this time. And once that class is over, I take a bath and then I eat dinner and then I sleep. Remember those placeholders? So currently those are almost suspended, right? So in fact, I've heard, and I have myself experienced, I've kind of lost a sense of time. Weekend melts into a weekday, and morning melts into an afternoon, and I sometimes don't even realize, because I don't have those traditional placeholders / schedules. I don't have a class to go to. I don't have an office to go to. Everything is in that limited space and in a timeless zone. So it's a really beautiful mix if you think about it. It is in this timeless and therefore a spaceless zone of sorts that in our minds we can be beautifully idle and at the same time very, very fertile. What does fertile mean? That means it can be so full of ideas at this time because there is no deadline staring at us constantly. There is no boss, there is no teacher that I'm looking at all the time, right? So we are our own teachers, we are our own preachers, we are our own writers and readers. And that's a great time to be in. So while all of you are surely being pushed, especially the children, if all of you are being pushed to cover your geometry and chemical energy lessons, I also hope that each of you is taking the time to simply stand still, because you have the luxury, you have the time to just stand still and observe. Observe the little beetle on the outside ledge of your bedroom window. Or if you are lucky enough, like I am, watch the big, large hedgehog that visits my garden and just crawls by. Usually I don't even have the time to see there's this huge hedgehog which lives in the edge of my garden, right? Or you watch the daffodil that was such a tiny little flower yesterday and looks amazingly large today. In a nutshell, you allow nature to amaze you, okay? And that would be something that you would enjoy, because yes, we've all heard of global climate change, the melting ice and the burning forests, but I can assure you that you will not feel moved to do something about it every day, because this requires everyday effort. Every day you have to remind yourself, I don't want a plastic cutlery. Every day you have to remind yourself, if I can walk, I would walk rather than take the car, and so on, right? You cannot do this on an everyday basis unless you are in love with nature, right? So take the time to fall in love with nature. And what is nature? It's right outside your physically constructed man-made house. If you step out of it, the moment you step out, the first step on the grass means you are becoming one with nature. And that allows you to rediscover it in many ways. On that note, let me start with my, I created a formal kind of a situation here. So let's see if you can all see that, okay? Let me get there. Any questions thus far? I hope not everybody is sleeping. Some can sleep, not everyone. Okay, so let's see. I want to share this. Okay. So can everybody see the, let's take a walk in the woods? Yes? Radhika?
Yes, we can
Okay,
see.
and people can write on it too. Interesting. Okay. So I named this session today, Let's Take a Walk in the Woods. I'm going to start with, while I personally write poetry, short fiction, written a lot of non-fiction, which means fact-based research papers and articles for newspapers. But this one is dedicated to short fiction, something like a poetry, okay? So now let's ask ourselves, what is... So I'm a teacher and my typical session is based on back and forth. Usually I'd love for people to chime in between if they want to, okay? So what is poetry if you were to ask? Well, it is a literary work in which special intensity is given to the expression of feelings and ideas by the use of distinct style and rhythm. Now that's a mouthful of things, right? What I want you to take from it is, what is poetry is, it's about expressing feelings and ideas. Okay, so that means while it is great that yes, you can be a scientist, you can be a doctor, you can be an engineer, I can assure you, you can be all of that and you will also always be someone who has feelings, right? So the ability to feel is not limited to someone who says, I'm a writer. Ability to feel is the first thing that God gifts us with when we become living beings, right? So expression of feelings and ideas by the use of distinct styles and rhythms. So you can create different forms of expression, but the idea is to express. So why do we want to write a poetry in particular? You want to write poetry because there are all sorts of ways in which you can categorize your poems, but the idea is still you express feelings and ideas. So you've heard of poetry in the form of ballads, sonnets, haikus. These are all terms for different styles of writing, where perhaps either the meter will differ, the number of lines you use will differ, and so on. But those are very technical nuances of writing a poetry. Eventually, what you want to do is, you want to ask yourself, what is it that I'm feeling? And you want to be able to express that, right? And it is an expression most likely of what you are feeling. But let me tell you, when your reader reads something, the most important thing that catches their eye is the expression of the collective experience. And that is what makes you a better writer. I would never say that any writer is bad, but I think a better writer is someone who has the ability to reflect in the writing, reflect in the whole poetry process, something which is available for everybody as a collective experience. Okay, so let me ask once again, can everybody see the slides that I have made here? Yes, right? Okay, because I don't want only me to be seen. Okay, so that is what a poetry is. So now we ask ourselves, what makes a poetry beautiful? Typically, poetries are not as long as long fiction or even short fiction for that matter, right? So it's not as long as a short story. A poetry is relatively short, so at least writing poetry perhaps is easier if you might think. It is short, which is great. Poetries need not always rhyme. Okay, it may or may not rhyme. When I say rhyming, so that means Dr. Seuss's poems are the best when we think about rhyme, right? It's all about rhyme, but of course, there's so much meaning attached to his rhyme. The cat sat on a rat wearing a blue hat. All that is rhyme, but it doesn't always have to be that. You could still express your feelings, keeping as long as your sentences are fluid, as long as they are filled with a punch, right? Now, the most important thing about poetry, which is very beautiful, is that it is open to interpretation, right? And that is what makes it so attractive as a form of expression, and even for the reader. Every person who reads the poetry can come out with a feeling which can be something so different from what the others felt, or a sense of nostalgia which can be different from what the others felt. And that is what makes poetry beautiful, that it is open to interpretation. So coming back to number D, which is, so we already talked about it is open to interpretation. So it makes it important. Now this last part is where we fit in as eco-ambassadors, okay? Poetry can be employed for activism. I want you to think about this. Poetry can be employed for activism. Now, so there are two things here. There is poetry and there is activism. When we talk about activism, what do we mean? We mean our ability to empathize with a given situation, with a given population, with a given issue, and to lend them our active engagement. That's what activism is, right? So you saying, oh, I would love to do something about the poor, or I feel so bad about the poor people in the world. Is that activism? No. That is because activism has two parts to it. Feeling plus your active engagement. You haven't given it the two parts. All you did was the feeling. Oh, I feel so bad for them. Well, the whole world feels bad for them, right? You need to be able to actively engage. You need to be able to say, I feel badly for them, and I am going to do something which is going to change the world or life of at least one poor person, or at least one aspect of poverty will be changed because of activism. So that is activism, right? And here I'm telling you, you can employ poetry for activism. And that's important. Why? Because as I just said, poetry is full of expression of feelings. So you create poetry which does what then? Well, you create poetry which, when the reader reads, feels, the reader feels, I need to do something about this issue, right? That is poetry for activism. So, for example, in India, there used to be, and there still are, an entire genre of writers called the progressive writers. So essentially the Asian writers. There's progressive writers like Faiz and Kefi Azmi, who've written about what? Who've written about religious divides, who've written about the status of women in the society, right? And so on. So all of these are trying to do what? They are essentially writers. They feel for something, and that feeling flows through their pens into the words. And then it becomes almost like an anthem. Have you heard the word anthem? It's a form of a poetry, right? We sing an anthem. It doesn't always have to be sung, but it becomes the catch song. It becomes the go-to song. It becomes the song that everybody latches onto and says, I identify with this cause. I will do something about it. It doesn't always have to be 100. You can do 0.1, someone else can do 5, and another person can do 10. But the idea is we all move the needle away from zero. We are all not sitting and doing zero, we're doing 0.1 at least, right? So you can employ poetry for activism, and I think that's what makes poetry so beautiful. Which means in the US in particular, for instance, activism has been involved with poetry in slave writings, right? So think about any group which has forever been oppressed or whose rights have been overlooked by the society. Those groups will resort to what? They have nothing. People don't give them rights. They have no power. The only thing they have is a very fertile brain. And if they are lucky, they have a pen. If they don't have a pen, they'll just orally, without writing, create anthems, create poetry, which will then get passed on from a person to person, generation to generation, right? And so we have an entire generation of slave writers who were either slaves or felt for the slaves. And those kind of writings became really popular and are still, they give us a great insight into the lives and the culture of the slaves back in the time. So let's take a look at one such poetry here. This is a poetry by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. It is called Bury Me in a Free Land. This is 1825 to 1911. She was born in 1825. Slavery was still prevalent in the US while she was growing up. So she saw, and she is an African-American writer, was herself. So she saw what was happening to people of her kind, right? And that is where she came in with the following poem. Make me a grave wherever you will, in a lowly plain or a lofty hill. Make it among earth's humblest graves, but not in a land where men are slaves. So if we just look at the first four lines, look at the emotion, the feeling that this person who is a slave herself or a slave child, who is representing the slaves, she is saying, even after dying, even after I'm dead, if you bury me in a land which is not free of slaves, I will consider myself a slave. So can you do me a favor? After I die, take me away from here and bury me anywhere from the lowly plain or a lofty hill, but humblest grave where there are no slaves. I could not rest if around my grave I heard the steps of a trembling slave. His shadow above my silent tomb would make it a place of fearful gloom. Right? So this poetry is, as I said, it's a slave voice, and there is fear around being a slave because slaves were exploited. And this is therefore, to some extent, it's an activism poem. But if you're interested, there is an entire range of slave poetry meant primarily to make people shudder at the idea of slavery or for the slaves to rise up. So there's this entire railroad slavery, right? Where the railroad tunnels were being dug by the slaves and they had to transfer messages to each other. They created songs which carried messages. So the songs became the messages. The songs became the current emails and texts of those days, right? So that is one place, again, where we see poetry and activism coming together. So let me get this workshop kind of more interactive. There's a bunch of other things we'll talk about. But for all of us to engage in poetry and to engage in what happens next, as we said, this is an eco-ambassador project. We want to, so another place where activism is required currently is what? We are in the eco-ambassador project. It is the environment, right? The environment is currently the unsung hero. It is being exploited. It cannot create poetry for itself. And that is where I think we as eco-ambassadors come in. We need to create awareness by talking, by writing, by reading, by moving people towards this cause. And we do that by the power of our word. And on that note, let me ask you guys to guess the author of the next text. So can you guys tell me? You can raise your hand and Radhika can let us know who's trying to speak. Who's the very famous eco activism? My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? Okay, Radhika, do you want to say who it is? Who's it gonna be?
Anyone else here who knows the answer?
I think I know the answer.
Alok raised the hand, I guess. And maybe Alok, you want to go ahead?
Greta Thunberg.
Greta Thunberg, yes. Great.
Okay, and how about this Chirag?
That was Greta Thunberg.
That was Greta Thunberg. You are absolutely right. That is true. And look at you two, Greta Thunberg sitting there. That's right. So yes.
And Vidya smiling, so I'm sure she knows the answer too.
I'm sure, and I'm so glad to see all of you people, all of you youngsters in particular, knew who the author is, right? Think about, while this is not poetry, this was said as a very, very heartfelt speech, but this is almost like poetry. This is all wrong. In one sentence, this child, Greta Thunberg, has, in one sentence, she has taken this long, large finger and pointed it to all of us adults. This is all wrong. Everything you are doing, your stores, your books, your education, your makeup, your food, your countries, your national songs, your national flags, everything is wrong. And that's a really big statement if you think about it. For a little child to turn around and tell the whole world, this is all wrong. Do you see the power of this sentence? And by calling it all wrong, she's giving us a go-ahead to, we need to make it right. She's giving us an activism call that let's make it right. And that is what the power of the word is, right? So how dare you? That's what she says, and so on and so forth. And so I urge all of you youngsters, those of you who guessed it right, 2 thumbs up to you, okay? Those of you who didn't know what we were talking about, go Google Greta Thunberg's transcript, the United Nations speech transcript, and go and read it. What is beautiful about her speech, which I haven't presented here in full, is it is made up of 2 things. And Radhika, you would recall this is coming from a Clio talk that we had a couple of days back, right? I was really taken by that Clio talk where she said, the lady who was presenting, she said, there are 2 things that we must always remember as eco-ambassadors. One is, what is our climate knowledge? So you can't talk to people if you don't have your science right, right? So climate science is important. And number 2 then is your climate activism. So while this here, we are focusing more on the feeling, on the poetry side, I urge all of you youngsters to continue to amp up on your climate science so that when you engage people like Greta Thunberg did, if you go and read her script, further down, she gives us statistics, she gives us facts, she talks about what is going on with the carbon pollution and so on. And that's important too, all right? But anyhow, so as I said, we can engage poetry for activism, for eco-activism, and that's where it becomes interesting. So let's see here. So does poetry have a role in nature? Absolutely, because poetry bridges the gap between nature and human beings by enabling other people to experience through the words aspects of nature which would otherwise have gone unnoticed. That means, for instance, when I was growing up, I read so many poetries written by English authors about the English countryside. Till date, I have never visited an English countryside, but those images are extremely vibrant. They are colorful. I know the rolling hills, I know the meadows, and I know the daffodils from the poetries that I read sitting in a small town in northern India. Right? Because those poetries, and especially when we were growing up, we didn't have Google to just type a word and take us there through at least the pictures. No. All we had was one paper where the word daffodils was written and the poetry was written. And we'd read it again and again and get transported to a countryside which till date I haven't visited, but whose beauty continues to charm me, right? And so the power of the poetry is that it bridges the gap between what is out there in the nature and for people who haven't visited it and so on. So poetry in its words presents nature, but it also represents nature. There's a difference between presenting and representing, right? So presenting is you say this is a rose because you saw a rose. But representing nature is this is a rose, and you ask people to now imagine what does it mean for them. Is this the rose that their mother once gave them? Is this the rose that you want to give to your friend? And so on, right? So many things are represented in the word that is written there. And this inspires human beings to respect nature. And that's what we want, right? Finally, we want all of us to respect nature. So the poetry has a role in nature. So let me start by asking all of us to quickly, if we have a pen, great. If not, let's see, at least 2 lines we can all come up with, okay? So the journey of writing, especially for you youngsters, if you want to write, the journey of writing needs to start, most importantly, with knowing your own self. Okay? And so in all English curriculums, there is this very common way of starting writing poetry by writing a poem called I Am. It's a 6 lines in one stanza. You write about yourself. Okay, and it needs to go on the following format. So it's a really lengthy one here. Maybe we can collectively come up with just the first 6. Okay, so you are going to write I am, and then think about what is it that you are. So for instance, I did this exercise just before starting this workshop, and I'll give you a go ahead. I wrote, I am funny, and I wrote, I think I wrote, I am funny and maybe serious. No, I think I wrote, let me see, let me quickly check. I wrote, okay, here it is. Okay, I wrote, I'm funny and silly. Okay, so you can write something about I am, then you write something about I wonder, something of curiosity. I hear an imaginary sound. What do I see? An imaginary sight. I want an actual desire, and I am. Repeat that. So let's just stick to the first stanza for now and see if you guys could be ready in 2 minutes. Should we take 2 minutes to finish this first stanza? And when you're ready, and if you feel you are okay to share, we'd love to hear what you thought about this. What did you write? And I would love to hear it from the youngsters first, but we will go on to our adults. Ready? Does anybody want to share? And Radhika can manage who is ready to share if they are. Okay.
No, whoever is done, we can start with.
I see Isha. Isha, you want to say?
Wait, actually, I have a question.
Yes.
So, do we have to like write the whole stanza, or just like, is it just like see what you can come up with?
Yeah, see what you can come up with. You don't have to write the whole stanza. Let me see. Maybe if you've written 1 or 2 lines would be great.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Okay, sure. I wrote like what, 2 lines?
Okay.
I am made of the sticks and stones I have walked on to come here.
I am made of sticks and stones.
Of these sticks and stones I have walked on to come here.
Oh, that's beautiful. I am made of stick stones that I have walked on to come here.
I wondered if I could fly over the wall.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Over and over the place I needed to be. It's the place where all lost things are found.
Ah, and do you have I see?
No, that's all I've written so far.
Great, those are beautiful, and I love the first line. I'm made of sticks and stones. All right, anybody else?
Okay, Asmi is ready. I think. Oh, she doesn't want to bid. Okay, Alok.
Alok.
I'm talkative and funny, a collector and a dreamer.
Interesting, a collector and a dreamer. See, so I mean, I don't know if you guys are noticing just by their first line introductory, I want to still call it a poem, the first introductory lines, we're getting to know these people themselves, right? And we don't have to see their picture to know them. We are learning a little bit about them, a collector and a dreamer. Now, those aren't very everyday words that you see, right? And so we are immediately curious about this person. What does he collect? We wonder what he collects, right? So thank you, Alok. That was beautiful. Is there anyone else who wants to share? Madhu?
Okay, go ahead.
Can I share?
I am creative. I am funny. I'm a big sister. I'm amazing.
Who's this? Okay. I love the I'm amazing. Do you see that? How beautiful is it? The power of the word. I am amazing. I love that sense of owning being amazing. So often we try to play ourselves very low, right? We try to say, no, I'm shy. Oh, I don't think I'm good enough for this. I don't think I can do that. But here is someone who starts by saying, I am amazing. Because isn't each one of us amazing in who we are? In the way we deal with people, the way we deal with life, the way we deal with our everyday challenges. It's already amazing, right? And then, of course, if you step out and show your activism for a cause that you've identified, you become super, triple amazing, right? So that's beautiful. And let's take one adult. Do we have, okay, who's this, Vidya? We can't hear you.
Okay, yeah, I know. I had to unmute my mic. Okay. I only have the first line so
okay.
far. I am a girl who runs for fun, who dreams of big things.
Ah, that's lovely. See, that's beautiful. Because that again is, I am a girl who runs for fun, is something great, something beautiful. And she immediately identifies with what she thinks of herself as. I am a girl who runs for fun. So things like that, right? Anything that makes us understand ourselves better, makes us then understand how we can empathize with others. So is there any adult who wants to share with us? Because I'd love to hear what our adult participants have written. Anyone here? Kean?
Oh, we have William raising
Okay,
his hand, maybe.
Sure, William, please.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
I just wrote a few lines.
Okay.
All right. So I am defiance, the green shoots of daffodils breaking through the frozen earth, harbinger of spring. I am resilience, the bending blades of beach grass against the unrelenting ocean gales.
Oh my God, Mr. William, are you William Wordsworth?
No, far from it.
I mean, no, you did not just write this. I think you've been writing this all your life.
Oh, I've lived a short life.
Oh my God, look at that, guys. Look at that. I mean, this is, I mean, you almost preceded all my slides. So I think all my slides are now redundant because this is what they were going to talk about. And that's beautiful. So clearly, do you read and write a lot of poetry, William?
A little bit, but I think you really got the message across that really nature is an inspiration, and it's so important for people to reconnect with the natural world.
No, but that's see, you are so right about all of that, and then for you to say, I am the dandelion, you know, with the sprouting my roots down. I mean, the imagery is really beautiful because it makes you feel that here is a person who is certainly rooted and anchored. And don't we all want to be anchored? We want to fly free, remember, right? We all want to fly free, but at the same time, there's something called home. There is a person in the world that we all want to come back to. There is a home that we all want to come back to, and that is our anchor. Or there is a feeling that we all come back, right? And so to be thus anchored through sprouting roots, as William said, it just calls for such beautiful imagery, right? And makes it so worth everything. Is there anybody else? I'm fluid with moving forward the way we are, or if anybody else has anything to say, let us know. Okay, all right. So I hope our adult listeners here got to write something too, and even if you aren't sharing.
Can I share?
Yes, please. Who is this? Asmi?
Tarana.
Okay, Tarana, yes.
I am important and honest and so much more. I wonder if I will get to go to 5th grade camp because of the current pandemic. I hear stones skating in the water just about to sink. I see air, but it's not clear as water. I want an animal that barks and wags its tail. I am important and honest and so much more.
Oh, that is gorgeous. That is truly gorgeous. It's so beautiful. And I love how you are fearful of your 5th grade camp not happening because of the current pandemic. You're right. So it's very beautiful. And I see the air, I hear, you need a dog, clearly. Your parents need to understand that. So all of these are ways of expressing what we are feeling. And the point being, when you start writing at such a young age, eventually, I can bet you that most of us adults, our writing currently is not just limited to what we are seeing, hearing, and so on. So it's going to have a lot of layers attached to it, right? So when I wrote, for instance, that I am funny and silly. Now, I am not silly in the way that you beautiful children are, right? I am not silly in that way, but I know the mistakes I do in life on a daily basis, right? So for me, that silliness comes with costs, it comes with tears, it comes with repercussions, which are sometimes very large. And therefore my poetry becomes, almost like therapy for me. When I write this poetry, it helps me heal. And that's what poetry is supposed to do to us, and we are supposed to do to nature. So thank you so much for writing that. Let's get on to the next part of it. So on the lines of what you guys just wrote, there is a poem by Walter Delamere called Me. It's a cute, sweet poem, something like I am. As long as I live, I shall always be myself and no other, just me. Like a tree, like a willow or elder, an aspen, a thorn, or a cypress forlorn. Like a flower for its hour, a primrose, a pink, or a violet, sunned by the sun and with dewdrops wet, always just me. Right? So what does this mean? This poetry is beautiful because something like what what William just said, as long as I live, I shall always be myself and no other, just me. So this is looking at the importance of always being true to who you are. Very often you will have peer pressure and we will tend to become or try to become like others because that's what people want. But no, being true to yourself, being always able to say what you want to say is what makes you. Tree like a willow or elder, willow and elder and aspen and thorn. These are all trees. These are names of the trees. So it's a good thing if you want to be a writer. Already I'm telling you, it's always good to get to know nature because the variety that's there and know it by name really allows for your own imagination to flourish and for you to be able to then think and talk and write in the variety that nature offers us. But in this poem, another thing that I really liked is like a flower for its hour. This is where the finiteness of human life comes in, or finiteness of natural life comes in, right? Like a flower for its hour. A flower doesn't bloom forever. It blooms and it's gone. So when it says hour, it's not saying that a flower only comes for 1 hour, but hey, there are a certain number of hours that a flower blooms and then it's gone. But even when that flower bloomed and there were these other things that were coming on it, the sun, the dewdrops, it still remained its own self and then it was gone. And that is the lesson from this poem, if you want to call it that, is the idea it is giving is that you want always to be yourself because that allows you to shine in your own hour in the way that you were meant to be. And trying to be something else then doesn't always take us very far or keep us happy. Okay, any questions here? A similar poem by Rachel Field is My Inside Self and My Outside Self. Now this is cute because we all have this, in fact, just before this conference started, Radhika and I were joking that, whatever comes on the screen, we wear a nice shirt, we put on a makeup and we look very presentable. Nobody knows that below this, we are still in our PJs. We haven't changed out of our night suits, right? So so what you're seeing is the outside self, and then there is the inside self, right? So these are physical, but even as personalities and human beings, we have an inside self and an outside self are different as can be. My outside self wears gingham smocks and very round is she, with freckles sprinkled on her nose and smoothly parted hair, and clumsy feet that cannot dance in heavy shoes and square. But oh, my little inside self, in gown of misty rose, she dances lighter than a leaf on blithe and twinkling toes. Her hair is blowing gold, and if you chanced her face to see, you would not think she could belong to staid and sober me. This poetry, the first stanza, is about a person, a girl, who is somewhat clumsy-footed. She cannot dance, and she maybe doesn't look as what she wants to look like. But on the inside, from within her, she feels, and this is what she feels like. She feels like a twinkle toes, blithe, as in very, very delicate and ready to fly and dance and the way she wants to be, right? So again, this is describing the kind of personalities that we can emerge into if we want, and what is the kind of dream that we have within us. And then I want to now graduate towards, we are coming towards the end, but I want to graduate towards Nature, Feather or Fur by John Becker. Now, this is a very cute poem. When you watch for feather or fur, do not stir. Feather or fur come crawling, creeping. Some come peeping, some by night and some by day. Most come gently, all come softly. Do not scare a friend away. When you watch for feather or fur, do not stir. Does anybody want to tell me in one line, what is this talking about? When you watch for feather or fur, what does feather or fur mean? What is this person watching for?
Like nature, the ecosystem.
The nature and the ecosystem. Very right. Feather or fur, we are looking for birds, we are looking for animals. So if you actually want to see them, and isn't that clear? Isn't that true? That if you want to watch them, you have to be one with the nature. That means you can't be your hurried, rushed person, right? You have to be do not stir. If you're quiet, you are silent, you are one with the nature, nature comes to you. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And then this poem is one to absolutely fall for. Trees by Joyce Kilmer. Joyce Kilmer, coincidentally born in New Jersey. And there aren't many poems he wrote, but this poem is what became one of the most favorite American poems. It's called Trees, and look how beautifully it portrays the essence of nature to us. I think that I shall never see a poem lovely as a tree whose hungry mouth is pressed against the earth's sweet flowing breast, a tree that looks at God all day and lifts her leafy arms to pray, a tree that may in summer wear a nest of robins in her hair, upon whose bosom snow has lain, who intimately lives with rain. Poems are made by fools like me, but only God can make a tree. Isn't that we here are trying to write a poem, whereas a tree on its own is actually a poem by itself, and a jungle is a book, right? A full of poetry for us. And that makes it so beautiful. And it tells us that, there's so much to write about nature. So when we go, and that's why we want to one with nature. I'm not going to read the whole of it, but again, I found this so beautiful. What do we plant? So when we go for forest conservation, when we try to preserve forests, or when we try to plant, what do you think you're planting? So let's say you put an apple seed. You think you are planting an apple tree, right? Look at what this poet tells us. What do we get when we plant the tree? We plant the ship which will cross the sea. We plant the pencils to scribble our notes. We plant the ballots to cast our votes. We plant the paper in which we read, the news that over wooden poles we speed. We plant the piles to erect our docks. We plant the rayon for shirts and socks. Do you see? This is telling us the circularity of the entire planet. How we are all connected. It's all one big circle. We think that here is this plant, it's an apple tree, and it'll give us apples. But what happens? That wood from the apple tree goes on to become the ship, which will cross the sea, carrying news from one continent to another, and so on, right? So we plant the paper in which we read, and we plant the rayon for shirts and socks. And since we are an eco-ambassador project, I had to look up what is the relationship between rayon and plant. Does anybody want to give us a quick, what do they think? What's the relationship here between rayon? Why did he use the word rayon? Because isn't rayon super synthetic something? Anyone? Well, I looked it up, and rayon means what? So rayon is actually made from an organic material. That means it's wood pulp, which is then eventually made into fiber. Unlike nylon, which is completely laboratory created. So yes, wood can eventually end up becoming part of our rayon shirt and socks. And what do we plant when we plant a tree? We plant the houses for you and me. We plant the rafters, the shingles, the floors, the plant, the studding, the latch, the doors. We plant the barrel, the box, the crate in which to ship all sorts of freight, right? Most importantly, what do we plant? Well, what do we plant when we plant a tree? 1,000 things that we daily see. We plant the spire that out-towers the crag. Crag is a cliff. We plant the staff for our country's flag. So even the country's flag, it used to stand on wooden poles, which came from the tree. We plant the shade from the hot sun free. We plant all these when we plant the tree, right? And isn't that gorgeous about how we are all connected in this nature through this process? I wanted to read the Daffodils to you, but William almost stole the thunder of that poem by writing something almost like William Wordsworth. This is a poem that I grew up with, and I liked it a lot. If you get a chance, you all can look it up for yourselves. What is interesting is the last stanza. I'll just read the last stanza, which says, "For oft when on my couch I lie." These COVID-induced days are couch potato days, right? So we think we can all lie on our couch and do what? We can watch TV, or better still, we can read a book, or better still, get up from the couch and take a walk in the nature, in the garden by ourselves, socially distanced, right? And then when we come back on the couch and lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye. Inward eye is the brain, the mind, the soul, the heart. It's not the eye which blinks and takes a look at everything outside. So when you are lying down on your sofa, you close your eyes after a nature walk, you are going to be filled up with what? My heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils, right? And so the nature continues to therefore inspire you and make you feel happy. So you can tell me, Radhika, how we need to manage time. I don't want to overspill it, okay? I have a couple of other things, but whenever you want, we can slow it down or speed it up.
I think we are almost reaching the end of the time slot, but I don't know if everyone else can have some more couple of more minutes. Netra, I think, has a question.
Are we going to be able to share some other poems that we've read somewhere?
Okay, why not? I would love for you to do that. Let's skip what I... we'll go to the last line at the end. Do you want to introduce us to yourself to us, and then
Netra, maybe you can start.
Should I introduce my poem?
Your name, your grade, and maybe you can do your poem.
Okay, my name is Netra. And did I introduce my poem next?
Yes, please go ahead.
My poem is called Treehouse. It's by Shel Silverstein, and it goes like this. A treehouse, a free house, a secret you and me house, a high up in the leafy branches, cozy as can be house. A street house, a neat house, be sure to wipe your feet house, is not my kind of house at all. Let's go live in a tree house.
And isn't Shelby so funny? Don't you like his writing so much? Right? Yes. Thank you, Netra. That was beautiful. Does anybody else have a point to share? Asmi?
Oh, I do.
Okay, Tarana and Asmi. So first, let's take Asmi.
Okay, go ahead, Asmi, and then Tarana.
So, my name is Asmi, and I am in 2nd grade, and I made my own poem. It's called Environment. Saving the environment is a very good deed, along with things we always need, like paper, shade, and air we breathe from trees. Trees and bushes are here and there, far or near, and everywhere. Maybe, just maybe, we can all stick together to transform the earth into amazing weather. I hope you learned something new today. Bye-bye for now, anyway.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. That's really lovely. I mean, this is more than a poem. It's almost ready to be a Greta Thunberg speech. Very beautiful. Yes, it's a good deed and it's something like we need. Very true. And I really like it's you youngsters who have to consider it a need. It's no longer a luxury, right? Back in my days when we were growing up, we were called tree huggers if we cared for nature. And people used to think of us as like, oh, these people, they hug trees. But you guys should be a generation of tree huggers. That means all of you should be people who hug trees before you hug, stuff bought from the mall or from the stores. And that's the only way you can save the earth for yourself, right? Okay, anybody else? Tarana, Chirag?
Okay, so I wrote this poem. It's pretty short. I call it Human Nature. Human nature is one thing, animals another. An eagle attacks 3 little birds. Outstanding, says the father. The father takes out his camera so he can show to Facebook, while the bird's mother and her friends attack the eagle like vulture. The mother swoops and calls very, very loud. The father ending the video. Did I get enough? Human nature is one thing, animals another. Who knows, maybe next time human nature will take over the mother.
Oh, oh my gosh, you guys are really active thinkers. You know what is great is you guys are thinking in all directions. You are combining human nature with real nature. You're combining, you're bringing in the birds and the bees. And I think that's what makes it so beautiful. So you all have to keep writing. Is there anyone else who wants to share anything? No? So, I mean, you know that we've all always listened to nature brought into our houses. When we talked about this little piggy went to market, or we talked about twinkle, twinkle, little stars, right? These are all our ways of what? Of identifying with nature, because eventually we are part of nature, okay? And so we can't be forever gone and think that we can be apart from nature. So the most important thing for you to know is that you are part of nature. Like, for instance, as the famous poet from India called Rabindranath Tagore, who went on to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, regardless of his Nobel, he wrote prolifically. He was a great writer, and he picked up a lot of imagery from nature when he wrote his poetry, right? And he said that for us all, the highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. That means we become part of nature. We are not separate from it. Okay. And we are not separate from a Chinese or an Indian or an American. We are part of the world, as is the tree and the bee. Okay. So Netra, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I have another poem.
Okay.
It's called Early Bird. It's also by Shel Silverstein. It's, oh, if you're a bird, be an early bird and catch a worm for your breakfast plate. If you're a bird, be an early bird, but if you're a worm, sleep late.
I know, I love this poem. It's so cute. Silverstein's poems are really Silberstein's. I don't know if all of you guys know that his poems are really cute, and you should all definitely, as Netra has rightly pointed, they are funny, they are cute, and they are full of nature being brought to us through animals and imageries and personification. So
I have a whole book on him.
I know, and I have that book too. So we are going to wind up because I don't want to take time of all the adults in particular also. So the second last poem that I wanted to just read for today is called Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Robert Frost is America's beloved poet, and his poems have all been very well read. This one is amazingly beautiful. It's about him and his horse stopping by the woods on a snowy evening. Whose woods are these? I think I know. His house is in the village though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. All of this is full of beautifully imagery. You can imagine stopping by the woods right outside the village line. The woods start, and here is this man on a dark evening with his horse, and they've just stopped by and they're looking into the woods. So the imagery is that there are these woods, and all of us as human beings have something unknown out there which will call us, and we have to take our call. What is it? What path will I take? Right? And then he goes on to say something so beautiful. The only other sound is the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. Thing that you as young eco ambassadors have to remember. If you think you didn't take plastic today and that's done, no, you have miles to go before the earth is fully healed and recovered, right? There are lots of things that need to be done, and there are promises to keep. Who are these promises to? Not to your mom or dad, not to your teacher, not to the president of the country. This is a promise that you have made only to yourself and to Mother Earth. That you are going to provide environmental friendly behaviors. You as individuals will become the people that everybody says, okay, this is what we want to be doing, right? So you have miles to go before I sleep. So I'm going to sign off with this last one, which is an old JG. And I want all of you guys to guess who this JG is. The poem is, when the night wind makes the pine trees creak and the pale clouds glide across the dark sky. Go out, my child, go out and seek your soul, the eternal I. That means, like the earth, you are actually eternal through your soul, which continues to live long after you've gone, right? But go and find it. Become you. For all the grasses rustling at your feet and every flaming stars that glitters high, above you close up and meet, in you the eternal I. Yes, my child, go out into the world, walk slow and silent, comprehending all, and by, your soul, the universe will know, itself the eternal I. Any guesses who this author is? Let me give you a clue. She is not a famous poetess, but she is famous. And she's a famous environmentalist.
I think I know who it is.
You can raise your hand and tell us.
Um, is it Jane Goodall?
Who is this? Who said that?
Ishika.
Ishika, you are absolutely right. Let's give her a big round of applause. That is absolutely right. It is Jane
I've heard
Goodall. So while she's not a poetess, but you all know what she did, right? So Jane Goodall, equipped with nothing more than a notebook, binoculars, and most important ingredient, fascination and curiosity, right? With wildlife. She braved a realm of unknowns to give the world a remarkable window into humankind's closest living relative, the chimpanzee, right? And now she goes across the world giving talks and lectures on everything that they found and what all can be done. And in the process, she meets youngsters and every once in a while composes a poem like the kind that I just brought to you guys. Okay, so 3 things to remember. Your being an eco ambassador from you being a poet. Number 2, your being a poet is only part of being an activist, right? So you have to have the feeling, the passion, but you have to be able to take it out and change the world and life at least 0.1, if not 100, okay? And try to do that. And number 3, most importantly, the writing process needs to start in these COVID-induced days. Start writing today. Start writing I am, she is, who is, what, read, write, read, write, read, write. Okay? I think that's all from my side. If anybody else has anything to say, and Radhika, you can take over.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. I think you have given us a new voice. There where we could write blogs, we could do a lot of writing, but this is the first time we are thinking about poetry and a voice on climate. And that could be so artistically done. And then as you said, this is the time to read and write and reflect, and it will help you to see which path you want to take. Like Robert Frost has said. So I think this is really a good time to have this reflective thinking. And while Asmi was writing her poem, she was also thinking about what do trees give us, what do trees. So we had this debate over other things that were coming to mind. So it was a very reflective activity, and I didn't realize that it would be so reflective. I thought, okay, you get this inspiration, you write these lines, and these lines are going to be amazing, and that's poetry. But clearly not. I think it's a process, and you read and write, and you read and write and reflect. And I hope that we will be able to use this new lesson from you during the COVID days. And we are in isolation, but not really in isolation, because now we have all these inspirational words that will follow us everywhere, and we will be able to use this for climate change, and to have discussions with our parents, and use it for inspiring others, including ourselves. So thank you, Nidhi, for this great session. There are many questions that are coming up. Maybe we can take up. You send an email to me or have a discussion. Okay, maybe one question from Alo. Yes,
I
Alo?
actually have a poem I'd like to say.
Okay, end with that poem. Great.
All right, let me share my screen.
Great.
Oh, I can't share. I can't share my screen.
Let me.
Sharing it.
Yes.
Anyways, let me just.
You can now share the screen if you like.
All right.
Or if it's too complicated, maybe just read it.
All right, I'll just read it.
Perfect.
It's just taking a bit of time to load. I have something pulled up. So this is a Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who flung herself out of the grass. The one who was eating sugar out of my hand. Who was moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who was gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms thoroughly, washes her face, and now she snaps her wings open and floats away.
Hi,
I
guys.
do not know exactly what a prayer is. I do not know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is your plan to do with one wild and precious life? Mary Oliver.
Wow.
Um, chose this poem because it talks about like how that we don't know where Earth came from, where nature came from. We don't know if God's real or not, but we know that nature is real, and that and then toward the very end, like, what do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your one precious life? Meaning, like, what will you do to make the world a better place?
Wow.
It means like, what will you do to make the world a better place? Yeah.
That's very, very inspiring. And I hope we take this inspiration and spend the rest of the evening just with these thoughts, and hopefully during the rest of the days as well. And we'll get through these difficult days by just being inspired by these words. Thank you, Alok. And thanks a lot, Nidhi. This was super wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Guys, yes.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So sweet.